Former President Donald Trump is set to be arraigned. He's due to make a court appearance in Miami in the classified documents case. The former president is expected to plead not guilty to 37 felony counts, claiming he kept highly sensitive documents related to national security and then lied about it. According to the new CBS poll, GOP primary voters still see Trump as their strongest candidate against President Biden. As of Monday, he's polling at 61%. That's nearly 30 points above Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Robert Costa is near the courthouse in Miami. Bob, good morning.
Good morning to you, Vlad. Former President Trump is expected to arrive here later today to be arraigned in federal court, which is right behind me. Last night, Trump met with his lawyers nearby to talk through how he wants to fight through this indictment and about how he might want to add new lawyers to his legal team in the coming weeks as he faces a new and more serious phase in federal court.
Former President Donald Trump arrived in Florida Monday afternoon, preparing for his second arraignment in 3 months. Trump is expected to plead not guilty to the 37 charges he faces. Prosecutors allege he illegally retained classified documents containing sensitive information on U.S. nuclear programs and military secrets after receiving a subpoena to turn them over. One of Trump's lawyers previewed their defense.
There's lots of issues in this case. And lots that we can do to hopefully expose the prosecutorial misconduct. And we have all hands on deck.
Also traveling to Miami on Monday was Jack Smith. The special counsel prosecuting Trump arrived in Florida Monday night. He has been a frequent target of the former president's attacks.
You have this maniac. I call him a deranged person, Jack Smith. He's deranged.
Several of Trump's 2024 political rivals have echoed his grievances about the Justice Department.
The DOJ and FBI have lost all credibility with the American people,
but are also questioning Trump's conduct.
President Trump was incredibly reckless with our national security. This puts all of our military men and women in danger.
He is now going to put this country through this when we didn't have to go through it. Everyone's blaming the prosecutors. He did it. It's his conduct.
And in Georgia, where Trump faces a separate probe for his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election, the state's Republican Governor Brian Kemp told us he finds the indictment concerning.
For us to win the presidential race in 2024, we don't need to be distracted. We need to be focused on the future.
Former President Trump will return to New Jersey after he's processed here this afternoon. He will speak to his supporters in the Garden State. He will also meet with major donors. But behind the scenes, CBS News is picking up something interesting. Some of the party's biggest donors are telling rival campaigns that they're keeping them in mind as well as Trump deals with all of these legal challenges. So it's shaking up the presidential race as well as the legal front. Vlad?
It certainly is. It's Anne-Marie. And yeah, it certainly is. And let's talk a little bit more about Trump's attorneys. One of them is actually featured in the indictment as part of the evidence against him. What are you hearing about Trump's attorneys?
Anne-Marie, good to be with you as well. It's interesting how much attorney-client privilege might factor into this case. So often the conversations between attorneys and clients are not part of any kind of trial. But in this case, a federal judge granted a request from prosecutors to have private notes and memos from Evan Corcoran, Trump's former lawyer, to be presented as part of the evidence in this investigation. That gives prosecutors a real window into what Trump was saying in terms of how to handle that subpoena, and it could be a really significant factor in the coming months as this all plays out.
Yeah, and you spoke to Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. I want to play some of that sound.
At the end of the day, the jury will be, render the ultimate verdict on that. But look, it is concerning, but I think also it's a distraction. It's distracting from what I think people need to be focused on in the presidential race. And I also think that there's a lot of people around the country, including myself, that are concerned about the fairness issue here on the federal agencies like the FBI and the Department of Justice.
So, the Republican Party, members of the party have been grappling with how to assess this, how to thread the needle, if you will, and not focusing on the actual accusations, as you heard. What does this reaction tell us about the GOP response to the indictment?
It's really going to be something to watch, how Republicans handle Trump as he continues to face legal challenges and political vulnerability One of the reasons I wanted to sit down with Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is he's a conservative in Georgia, but he also has underscored his own independence from Trump and how he handled 2020, defended his state's election integrity. And I've been hearing buzz from some party donors and activists that should Trump continue to dominate the field, there might be an effort to try to draft Governor Kemp or someone like Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin into the race late to counter Trump, to give the party some kind of alternative if Florida Governor Ron DeSantis or others like former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie or former Vice President Mike Pence don't get any traction. So it's good to keep in touch with people like Kemp to kind of get the pulse of what the real inside leaders in the party are thinking and doing.
Right. Bob Costa, thank you very much. Well, CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman is here now to talk a little bit more about what we can expect today. Rikki, we talked a little bit about Trump's legal team. There's a bit of a shakeup. Yes, funnily enough, the one attorney that's featured in the indictment is still on the team, but a couple of other attorneys are gone.
What happened once the indictment was filed, even before we knew what the indictment really said, is that two of the attorneys, quote unquote, resigned. We do not necessarily know what the circumstances were. Were they fired or did they just leave? It's hard to believe that they just left, but we don't know. And ultimately now it doesn't matter because they're gone. In the meantime, Donald Trump decided that the lead attorney was going to be Todd Blanche. We have seen Todd Blanche before. He is the lead attorney who was also brought in at the last minute for the New York indictment, which has to do with falsifying business records, having to do with the Stormy Daniels scandal. So Todd Blanche from New York left one of the most prestigious firms in the country, Cadwalader, in order to represent President Trump in New York. Well, now he's going to be the person overseeing this much more complex case in Florida. In addition, what we had heard and read is that Donald Trump was having trouble getting more lawyers on that Florida team. And why was it necessary for him to get another lawyer? You cannot just waltz into a courthouse in another state or federal court in another state and say, I'm a lawyer from New York. I'm here. It doesn't work that way. You must, by local rules, get local counsel because the court wants someone who is a member of that bar, this is the Southern District of Florida, to be the person responsible to get notices, to be the person who has the discovery, to have an office where someone is responsible to bar rules there. So Chris Kynes was always on this Donald Trump legal team, but we haven't heard a lot about him in a long time. So at least Chris Kynes can go to court today with Todd Blanche and say, at least for today, I am local counsel. There's some rumblings about whether or not Chris Kynes will be the local counsel who stays. But apparently Donald Trump has been interviewing a lot of lawyers, and there's a lot of reasons why lawyers might not want this case.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So as they waltz into court today, what would the team's sort of legal strategy, if there is any strategy, what would they be thinking about today?
Today is simple for the lawyers, not necessarily simple for the defendant, because no matter what his brave face is, both in New York when indicted and here when indicted, the reality of the situation is this is a sober moment. It is somber. He will be brought into the courthouse, not through the public main entrance, but through a side door. He will be brought up to be processed. He'll have Secret Service. He's going to get turned over to the courthouse security. He will be printed. That's electronic. We don't know if there will be a mugshot. It doesn't really matter. We all know who the defendant is. But he is then considered arrested. I mean, he's in custody. He goes down. There won't be handcuffs. He's not going to come out of some, holding cell with any other prisoners. He's going to go into the courthouse. And it's a simple process. The process is really there to say, do you waive the reading of the indictment rather than it being read line by line? The answer is yes, so waived, Your Honor. And then the question becomes a question of bail. There is not going to be bail set in this case. There's no reason for it. Donald Trump is running for president. He's not a flight risk. Then they don't have to do that today, by the way, but I think that most of us expect that they will.
So does Donald Trump, because he expects to be getting on a plane and going back.
Well, no,
back
I mean, in terms of the arraignment itself. Sometimes they do a first appearance and an arraignment later, but for expediency's sake and also for security's sake, it'll happen today.
Yeah.
There might be a condition of bail. I mean, obviously, we all know that you're not supposed to commit another crime while you're out on your own recognizance before a trial.
Could a condition be zip it?
My instinct is that will not be discussed today, but what might be discussed at a later time once Donald Trump speaks about this case. And then the judge may or may not feel that there should be some strictures. But you have to remember, he's a presidential candidate. This is a really fine line. Yes. Very difficult in New York, very difficult here.
Rikki Klieman, thank you very much. I know we're going to be talking to you a whole lot more, so thank you. All right, so our team of correspondents and experts, of course, will be following this story throughout the day. We're going to have a special report starting at 2 p.m. Eastern. That is about an hour before Donald Trump is expected to be arraigned, and you can stream that right here on CBS News.